What up, gang? Carolina Jackpot time coming at you. It is Independence Day. It is July the 4th, 2024. I hope you guys and gals are having a great holiday. If you're off work today, congratulations. If you got off work a little bit early today like I did, congratulations to that also. If you didn't get off work today, well, that sucks for you, and I hope you get an extra day off to atone for that. It is very hot. It's very humid here in the upstate of South Carolina. We're approaching 95 degrees right now. At the time that I'm making this video, as you'll see in the background, a Clemson friend of mine helped me with some redneck ingenuity by rigging a box fan up to the top of the egg chair to give me a little bit of ventilation from this heat. We're going to dive right into this subject today, but hey, before we get into that, I'm gonna hit you with this. I got this shirt on. This team makes me drink. Hadn't worn this one in several years. It actually was really tight on me. I've hit the low carbs lately and dropped about 15 lbs. So it's still kind of tight, but I like it. This is a New York Jets shirt. I think that this might be the first thing that we need to add to the Carolina Jackpot merch store, and that is this in garnet, maybe with some white writing, maybe a little black splashed in there, maybe a little gray as well, with a Gamecock and a "This Team Makes Me Drink," because as you know, they can absolutely drive us crazy, and that is the premise of the video today. I'm talking my top 5 candidates to replace Shane Beamer if things go south in the 2024 season and he is let go at some time during the season or after the season ends. There was an article published, and I found out about it over on Facebook. Someone has talked in a Gamecock group about, well, there's a top 5 list to replace Beamer out there over on sportskeeda.com, and I'm going to link that article down in the description box below. And I looked everywhere for it. I looked all over Sportskeeda, couldn't find it there. I Googled it. Finally, I found it. This article was actually written in November of last year, late November. And the names on this article are just absolutely silly, guys. They are absolutely dumb. They are people with, number one, they have no ties to the University of South Carolina. And in fact, this list I have here today, only one of these people has ties to the University of South Carolina as well. But these are a lot of left coast coaches, a lot of non-Power 5 type coaches that just, they would not even be considered. Gary Anderson, head coach at Utah State, Oregon's offensive coordinator. How you doing? I have no doubt that these are good coaches and they do a good job in their space, but they're not going to get into this space. This is a legitimate list of top 5 candidates to replace Shane Beamer if he is indeed let go at some point during this season. And let me preface all this before I get into it by saying this, guys. I'm not putting this video out here hoping that he fails, right? Because hoping that he fails is just, that's just hoping for mediocrity and failure and things to be as bad or worse than they have been. I don't want to see that. I want to see Shane Beamer succeed. I really, really do. However, signs have pointed to him not being able to do that. And unfortunately, it's time for a little damage control. It's time for Gamecock fans to kind of unite here and kind of look toward the future, have a backup plan, an ace in the hole, something in our back pocket, and we need to have a list of our top 5 candidates that we need to present to whoever is conducting this head coaching search. My God, don't let it be Ray Tanner again. Let's get into it. Carolina Jackpots, top 5 candidates to replace Shane Beamer if he's let go after 2024. There's a few names I want to get into real quick that landed outside the top 5, and I'm going to tell you why. And they are viable, hot names to be head coaches in the future. Number 1, I've got Clemson offensive coordinator Garrett Riley. Yes, indeed. I did put him on this list. Vastly underachieved last year. I don't think he's a good fit at Clemson. I think that Dabo Swinney has too much of a finger on what goes on play calling wise, not only with the defense but with the offense as well. And maybe that's hampering Garrett Riley just a little bit. I think Clemson inherently recruits much better talent on the defensive side of the ball, so Dabo getting involved in that really doesn't make that much of a difference, but on the offensive side of the ball, it does. Now, in 2022, he was the Frank Broyles Award winner as the top assistant coach in college football, as the offensive coordinator at Texas Christian, TCU. Of course, they made it to college football playoffs, made it to the college football national championship game where they got blown out by Georgia. I don't really think this was Garrett Riley's fault. I think that they were just absolutely overmatched by a team that was a jackhammer, and there was nothing that was going to stand in their way. Ultimately, though, I think Garrett Riley lands at a Big 12 program. I think he's kind of been born and bred in that direction. His brother, of course, Lincoln Riley. And what you want to say about Lincoln Riley, he's an elite offensive mind. He's, as far as a head coach, maybe not so much. He's seems to be disinterested in defensive football, but he's still a winner. Regardless of that, he's kind of more Midwest, West Coast based. I kind of think that Garrett Riley would tend to gravitate that way when he's given an opportunity to coach a Power 5 or maybe a Group of 5 program if that opportunity doesn't present itself first. Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator at Georgia. Again, a very young guy. I don't think that, and a Georgia fan can correct me if I'm wrong, that he's ever even played a snap of football in his life. He was at Alabama and kind of got his way onto the staff there as a graduate student coach, and then moved up to graduate assistant. When he graduated, he was there. He learned under Nick Saban. He learned under Kirby Smart. He came to Georgia, and Kirby Smart himself has said one of the people that has helped him the most since he's been at Georgia actually was Glenn Schumann. He worked under Dan Lanning as a co-defensive coordinator. He was a very, very successful defensive coordinator, now a head coach at Oregon. And former South Carolina coach Will Muschamp, who is a brilliant defensive mind, a brilliant defensive coordinator in his own right, not a good head coach, not a good program builder or manager, but a really good defensive coordinator. He's learned there under him as well. This guy is young. He really doesn't have the experience. I think South Carolina needs an offensive-minded head coach. So keep that in mind as I'm going through this list as well. Also, Alex Golesh, the head coach at South Florida, is one that's also popped into my radar a little bit. And I said offensive mind. Well, he's an absolute offensive mind. He's a Josh Heupel disciple. Didn't mean to do that rhyme there, but I did. So let me scratch some records real quick. His former offensive coordinator at Tennessee, now head coach at South Florida. Yet another young guy with not a whole lot of coaching experience in terms of head coaching under his belt. I think that might be a little bit of a risky hire, although I think that he may be worth stepping out of bounds and taking a risk on at some point. Of these three, I would think Golesh would be the one that I would go after if I had to go after any three of them. But honestly, I wouldn't go after any of them. Coming in at number 5 on my list is South Carolina tight ends coach and run game coordinator Shawn Elliott. Now, let me get into this by saying he spent a lot of time at the University of South Carolina. He was the offensive line coach here and the run game coordinator from 2010 through 2016. In 2015, he was the interim head coach, led South Carolina to 2 conference wins after Steve Spurrier acted like a deadbeat dad and decided to quit on us. After that, he left the Gamecock staff and he was the head coach at Georgia State from 2017 to 2023. And not only was he the head coach there, he had a lot to do with really building that program up. Okay, he saw kind of like the transition of Georgia State from playing in the venue they were at before to playing at the newly revamped Turner Field, which was turned into a college football stadium, which obviously, of course, used to be the home of the Atlanta Braves. They chopped the upper deck off of it, reconfigured it into a college football stadium. And he did a relatively good job there. He was 42-49 in his tenure there. 4-1, though, in bowl games. It seemed like Georgia State always started out slow, but they finished really well. And I think that is a testament to Sean Elliott's resilience and his refusal to give up and his refusal to let his players give up on a bad season. Now, shockingly, he resigned on February the 15th, one day after Valentine's Day, right? Yeah, happy Valentine's Day, Georgia State. They had to cancel spring practice or postpone it or something because of this. It left Georgia State to come do this job at South Carolina. Problem is, Georgia State had become a feeder program for Power 5 schools. You saw it last year in the transfer portal. Wide receiver Robert Lewis was picked up. He was taken to Auburn. Marcus Carroll, he ends up taking the ride to Mizzou, top running back in the program. I think Sean Elliott was tired of the grind of maybe not recruiting, but I think he was tired of the grind of having to re-recruit his program year and year and year. I don't think he's really likes the direction that college football is going right now. So I place him as a real long shot for landing the South Carolina head coaching job. Positives about him, though, he is a major motivator. He is going to make a heck of a difference in South Carolina's team this year, whether the naysayers want to admit it or not. He loves it at South Carolina. He's a Camden, South Carolina native, played his high school football here. He played college football at App State just a few hours up the road. He never even uprooted his family after he left from South Carolina and went to Georgia State. However, I don't think his heart is in being a head coach. I think his heart is in being an assistant, being a hard charger, being a hard driver, and that's it. I don't think he wants to run a program anymore, not at this point. This might be a sentimental type hire. I think if they made this hire, even if he shows just a little bit of interest without going out and cultivating more candidates and this time just relying on players to tell you how much they love him, how much he means to us, how much he does this, how much he does that, I think this would be a really lazy and not a good hire for South Carolina to make. He's really good at what he does. Let's leave it at that. Number 5, that is Sean Elliott. Coming in at number 4 on this list, and maybe a surprise type candidate for you guys, is Kansas head coach Lance Leipold. Now, he has been at Kansas for 3 years, has a 17-21 overall record. You might say, well, geez, jackpot, that's not very good. But it was 2-10 in his first year, which was back in 2021. Since then, he's taken Kansas to 2 bowl games, won 1, lost 1. First time since 2007 and 2008 they've been to bowl games in back-to-back seasons. He is 54-54 in 10 years at the FBS level. Of course, he was 37-33 at the University of Buffalo, which is a job he took over, and that program was in absolute awful shape when he took it over, guys. They were absolutely terrible. 10 and 11 loss seasons had become the norm at the University of Buffalo, and looking over this in like a 12-15 year stretch, I think they went 8-6 one year, and other than that, they just absolutely were just awful. Also, he won 6 Division III titles as the head coach at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater from 2007 to 2014. Guess what? That means he didn't win a title 1 year. That's right, the entire Division III title. This guy's pretty dang good. Despite his success, he was only number 42, though, in recruiting in 2024 and number 52 overall in the transfer portal. Now, you might wonder, well, that's not very good. There's not funds at Kansas to do any better than that. Well, if you look at their basketball program in 2024, they were number 8 in recruiting, and they were number 3 in the transfer portal rankings. Of course, Kansas with a much richer history on the hardwood than they have on the gridiron. So, look, I mean, be that as it may, Kansas is kind of limited as far as funding, as far as NIL goes. He has a deal right now that is paying him $7 million a year to be their coach. That's why I put him all the way down at number 4. I think this guy would be an absolute grand slam hire for South Carolina. Despite his age, he is 60 years old. So, go on ahead and make your jokes. But guess what? If South Carolina had hired this guy as head football coach, people would be throwing a parade. They hired 7-year-old Paul Marineri, and everybody is laughing at us for getting a baseball coach that's ready to go to the nursing home. Doesn't make any sense to me. However, I do see him as a relative long shot. His area of coaching expertise has not been anywhere in the Southeast. He has no ties to this area, so recruiting may be a little bit of a challenge, despite the fact that, we can lay it out on paper what he's done with the teams that he's coached. But South Carolina would be paying a buyout. You're not going to be able to go, in my opinion, a heck of a lot higher than the $7 million a year that Kansas is paying him right now. Also, Kansas has invested not only a ton into Lance Leopold's salary, they've invested a ton into building 3/4 of a new stadium. They're going to be away from the David Booth Memorial Stadium in Lawrence for a couple of years, and they're going to be playing their games at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City and at an MLS soccer stadium while they rebuild 3/4 of that stadium. It's a huge project there, and if you've seen any of the renderings of what it looks like when it's going to be finished, it looks pretty sweet. I think Leopold is probably in a good situation at Kansas. However, of sitting Power 5 head coaches right now, this guy, he's jam up. So I would not hesitate at all if I were Ray Tanner. Let's make sure you don't make this hire to go after this guy and make him tell me no. Coming at number 3 on Carolina Jackpot's list is Wake Forest head coach Dave Clawson. Now, this gentleman is 63 and 61 at Wake Forest since he's been there, 95 and 92 overall at the FBS level. He was the head coach at Bowling Green before he came to Wake Forest. That's 16 years worth of experience. He was also 55 and 49 in 9 years at the FCS level. All told, he's been a head coach since 1999. That's a lot of years under the belt for a guy who's only 56 years old and seemingly has a lot of gas left in the tank. Now, he led Wake Forest to 7 bowl games in a row. People don't realize that, but he left them to 7 bowl seasons in a row. Now, that string was broken last year. He also led them their highest AP ranking ever in school history at 10th in 2021 and in 2022. Ironically, when they got ranked 10th, they lost the next week. ACC championship game participant in 2021 and helped develop quarterbacks that you would know, such as Jamie Newman and Sam Hartman, who spent last season at Notre Dame. He's also got a little bit of SEC experience, albeit it's so little it's almost irrelevant. In 2008, he was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee under Phil Fulmer, and they really didn't have a good year in 2008, and it led to Phil Fulmer being fired. However, that's been a long time ago, and who knows what other factors there were going on there. But he was asked in an interview a couple of years ago before the Clemson game about playing Rocky Top, and did it bother him at all trying to get ready and have a game plan going to distract him at all. And he said, well, unfortunately for me, they didn't play it a whole heck of a lot when I was there. So I thought that was kind of funny. I guess that's one of those kind of you had to be there type things. But his teams run that slow mesh type offense. It can be really difficult to defend if you're not used to seeing it, unless your name is Brent Venables and you're the defensive coordinator at Clemson, in which case you absolutely snuff it out and destroy it. It requires some smart offensive linemen, and maybe it's kind of made for offensive lines that aren't that strong, that can't hold the block for that long, but it does require them to have, like, a play can succeed or fail based on just a fraction of a second there with that offense. So it's for the thinking man. I think that would be kind of dangerous to defend if South Carolina were to implement some type of offense such as that, because none of these SEC teams have really defended against that. Now, you have seen Wake Forest play some SEC teams and not do very well. However, I mean, it's the talent level at Wake Forest versus the talent level he would be able to get in at South Carolina. There's a huge discrepancy there. You know, throw all the jokes and shade that you want to at South Carolina, but you know that to be true. His salary is around $4 million a year. Wake Forest is a private school, kind of like Vanderbilt, Duke, and so they don't really disclose all that information, but of everything I've been able to gather up, he makes about $4 million a year. Transfer portal and recruiting is extremely hard at Wake Forest. This past season, 2024, they finished up number 68 in recruiting. And they finished number 113 in the transfer portal. And they absolutely cannot compete in that avenue. There's just not the money there, and there's just not the buy-in to the football program at a Wake Forest, even when they're doing well, to fund NIL, transfer portal, to the level where he's going to be able to restock the cupboard every single year. You look at him, he lost Sam Hartman after the 2022 season to Notre Dame, when he could have come back and played his graduate season at Wake Forest. He lost his second leading rusher last year to Indiana. And he lost his leading wide receiver to Nebraska. He lost another one to in-state foe NC State. So, I mean, Clawson, I gave away something there, is having to scramble and play a lot of cleanup, a lot of catch-up. But I think this guy is a championship-level coach if he's just given a landing spot where he's able to spend a little bit more money, get a little bit more focus on the football program. I think that he could get over that hump and actually be a viable Power 5 head coach. He also interviewed, as I understand it, for the South Carolina job back in 2020. There were several people interviewed for that job. One of them we're going to talk about here in a minute. Another was Billy Napier. One was Scott Satterfield, who's now the head coach at Cincinnati. And another one was Dave Clawson. Why didn't they bite on him? I don't know. Let's get on to number 2 on this list. Number 2 on Carolina Jackpot's list may be a surprise to some of you, maybe not so much of a surprise to others. Maybe I gave it away a little bit with a little bit of a misspeak in the last video, and that is NC State head coach Dave Doeren. 81-58 in 11 years at North Carolina State. 104-65 overall. He had 2 outstanding years as head coach at Miami of Ohio before coming to NC State. This guy is 52 years old, and he's only had 2 losing seasons in his entire career as a head coach. Now, he did hit the 9-win mark at NC State 4 times. That's huge. NC State haven't had that kind of success and it be replicated year over year for really ever. I mean, this has been largely a middling program. You may kind of look back to Chuck Amato and say, well, I mean, he had some success there. Chuck Amato did not stay at NC State nearly as long as what Dave Doeren has. But he just can't quite get over the hump here. Okay, hasn't won any ACC titles. But one of the good things about Doeren, despite the consistency, is his knack for bringing in good coordinators. Like this year, Robert Anae, a traveling type offensive coordinator that's been at a million different places, is the offensive coordinator there and probably going to do some really good things at NC State. His salary, $5.5 million annually, which in Carolina Jackpot's opinion, for what he's been giving you, he's kind of underpaid. And he actually just signed a contract extension that's through 2029. So that may be one of the things that South Carolina would hire away from when looking at a Dave Doeren as a potential replacement for Shane Beamer. In 2024, his recruiting class was number 27. That's really high for NC State. That's really good, and that's out kicking the coverage a lot. They landed a 4-star in Jonathan Paylor, a wide receiver out of the Burlington, North Carolina area who looked to be a lock to South Carolina. NC State swooped in, gave that bag at the last moment, and Paylor ended up going to NC State. Really, really pissed me off, but, I mean, you gotta give it to them. I mean, they got the guy. They were also number 18 in the transfer portal. Now, they had a really horrible transfer portal haul the year before in 2023. So is this 2024 haul just a one-off? Which, namely, the best player that they got was Jordan Waters, who was a running back at Duke. Of course, a lot of players left Duke after Mike Elko bolted for Texas A&M and Manny Diaz was brought in as the head coach. Or is it maybe just a thing where these coaches are just getting acclimated to cultivating this transfer portal and don't really hold that so much against Doeren for not doing so great in 2023? We'll have to see. He does a great job, however, and his staff does as well, of keeping the North Carolina in-state talent in North Carolina. And that may be something that South Carolina would be greatly benefited by, is getting some players from North Carolina. They already get a decent amount of them. Now, a guy with recruiting ties to North Carolina, not necessarily recruiting to a North Carolina school, but North Carolina is way more populated than South Carolina. In fact, about twice so, I think. So guess what? That's twice as many high school players that you could pull in out of there. If you could do that there, along with cultivating the South Carolina high school recruiting ground, which is pretty fertile for a small state, I mean, we could do some really, really good things here. Another thing I like about Doeren is he doesn't have the best relationship in the world with Clemson and head coach Dabo Swinney. Because in 2017, NC State was a contender for the ACC title. They faced off against Clemson and Raleigh in a big game and ultimately ended up losing that game 28-20 against a team that would go on to the college football playoffs in Clemson. However, NC State brought a laptop out over on the sidelines, and Dabo Swinney cried about it, had a big to-do about it, was against the rules, and he said he was going to report it to the NCAA. Dave Doeren said, you know what, we lost the game, let's just get over it, let's move on. You know, I'm ready for Boston College or whoever the hell they were playing the next week, but they would not let it go. In fact, 2 years later in 2019, after Clemson beat NC State and Raleigh, they had what was described as a frosty handshake at midfield. And I don't really know what frosty is, but from the verbiage of that, I would think that it probably means it wasn't so warm and fuzzy. So I like this guy. I like him. I like the fact that he kind of low-key talks shit. And I like the fact that he doesn't like Clemson and Dabo Swinney. He's not going to be the kind of guy who goes up to Clemson's fourth-string holder on their field goal attempts like Shane Beamer did before this game this year and told him how great of a job he did at singing the national anthem in the church choir practice. That's really great. It's nice. I love it, Shane Beamer, that you are nice to kids. Okay? This is not a game where you're supposed to be nice to everybody, buddy. It's just absolutely not. So I really like that, despite the fact that a lot of Gamecock fans don't like this guy, and they would absolutely just love to see him go piss up a rope and stay at NC State for a million years. I think Dave Doeren would be a solid head coach at South Carolina, and he would actually be number one on my list if it weren't for the fact that he just signed an extension at North Carolina State. However, if South Carolina really want to come after the guy, I think they could have him, and I think NC State may be hesitant to give him another extension after he just got one this year. This guy is a really good coach who, in my opinion, just needs a little bit more resources, a little bit more NIL money, a little bit more TV money to get over that hump. I think he could do it at South Carolina. Dave Doeren, number 2, solid dude. Now, let's get on to number 1. That's what you've been waiting for. If you've done this by process of elimination, maybe you have not, but my number 1 candidate to replace Shane Beamer, if he is let go in 2024, is Jamey Chadwell. He is the head coach of the Liberty Flames, a member of Conference USA. Chadwell has only been at Liberty for 1 year. Liberty is a FBS non-Power 5 program, and he was at Coastal Carolina for several years prior to this. A lot of people saw this as a lateral move. They really couldn't understand why that move was made. Well, I can tell you why he made it. Because Liberty is paying him a $4 million a year salary. Now, this is another private school which really doesn't disclose things a lot, but those who are in the know kind of know, and that's what he's getting paid there. He was only making $1.15 million a year at Coastal Carolina, with some incentives for him and his head coaches for succeeding, making bowl games, getting conference championships, those type of things. So he got a little bit more, but he's making a heck of a lot more at Liberty. This was an absolute cash windfall for Jamey Chadwell. $4 million a year is a hell of a lot of money to coach a non-Power 5 program. But he's 52-23 overall in his FBS coaching career. He started out at Coastal Carolina in 2017. He kind of was the interim coach for a year when head coach Joe Moglia was out with some health issues. Moglia came back in 2018, then 2019 he retires. Chadwell coaches the team from 2019 through 2022, and then he gets hired on at Liberty. Prior to that, he was a head coach at FCS, Charleston Southern in the state of South Carolina, and Division II school in North Greenville, also in the state of South Carolina. Also, he had winning records at both of these schools. He went to a New Year's Six Bowl last year after a 13-0 season in which he won the conference championship and a conference championship game there in Conference USA. Of course, got blown out in the New Year's Six Bowl to finish 13-1 by Oregon. But, you know, I mean, that's what we would expect. Here's Oregon's talent level, and here's Liberty's. I think they did a phenomenal job. Why he was not brought on at South Carolina back in 2020, I really don't know. It's probably had something to do with, you know, just the lack of time as a head coach there at a level other than FCS or Division II. Of course, he'd only been at Coastal Carolina for a couple years prior to that. But maybe that inexperience kept them off a little bit. So guess what? They went out and hired somebody with absolutely no head coaching experience. Makes a hell of a lot of sense there. His team runs something. It's kind of a spread option type offense, which he's run since his days way back at FCS at Charleston Southern. Not really sure what he ran at North Greenville. I'm assuming it's the same thing. I don't have any film on North Greenville that I can reference. You don't see this type of offense around a lot, and teams have a hard time preparing for it, and they have a hard time defending it as well. As far as recruiting goes, not real great. They were ranked number 100 back in the 2024 cycle, and that was number 93 or excuse me, number 93 in the transfer portal. They did haul in 15 players, 10 of them from FBS programs, however. So one would wonder, why they ranked all the way down at number 93. Well, as transfers, most of these guys were either 3 stars or they were low 3-star transfers, or either they didn't have any stars at all. This guy's a developer. So at South Carolina, with the ability and the money to bring in a little bit better athlete out of the transfer portal than what he's able to do at some of these other schools, I mean, I think that the sky is the absolute limit here. He's helped develop quarterbacks that you would know of, such as Caden Salter, who was a former Tennessee player, ended up transferring. He ended up at Liberty. And Grayson McCall, who was a 4-year starter at Coastal Carolina, 3 years under Jamey Chadwell, and then 1 year last year under Tim Beck. Grayson McCall, since he's transferred out now, he's ironically going to be the quarterback for Dave Doran at NC State. I honestly think that South Carolina could have taken a shot in the dark back in 2020 and hired this guy to be the head coach, and I think that the results probably would not have been a whole lot different. In fact, they may have been a little bit better than they have been under Shane Beamer. I definitely think that I just think there's more energy here, more head coaching experience, and probably a little bit more knowledge than what Shane Beamer has. And this is not a knock on Shane Beamer type video, despite the title of it, despite what you guys may think. I know down in the comment section I'm going to be absolutely bombarded with, you're already throwing in a towel on 2024, you're ready to fire him right now. Look, dude, I was ready to fire him at the end of 2023. I've decided to circle the wagons and really support this guy this year. But I think that not having in the back of your mind who are we going to replace him with is just crazy thoughts, and it's just not very becoming of a program whatsoever. You have to have a backup plan, and those are my top 5 candidates to replace Shane Beamer. Let me know down in the comment section below who you think would be excellent choices to replace Beamer if he's let go at South Carolina for whatever reason. And I will see you guys later on. I really appreciate you all. I hope you have a happy rest of your holiday. I'll catch you on the next. Still, go Gamecocks, by God, and Spurs up to my toes up.